Okay, in this second clip we're going to be looking at how to interpret our student's report as a tutor. So I am on page 4 of the tutor's handbook, and I want to show you how the scale works here. There's going to be a scale like this for each of the 7 factors that has been assessed on your tutees. And this scale works like a seesaw. So effectively it's about tipping from one end to the other. There will be a subject-specific score here, so here's science, and there will be an optimal position as well. And the goal of this is to help our tutees to move their subject-specific scores towards the optimal position upon the scale. Okay, I want to scroll down to page 5 now. Now, this is an important table. It highlights that there are different optimal positions for different subjects. So I've got my 7 different scales here, the 7 different factors that determine the mindset of a student: disclosure, trust of one's own ideas, trust of other people's ideas, pace, perspective, processing and planning. And then I've got my subjects down here. So in maths, for example, a high trust of others is an optimal score, whereas in the arts, a low trust of others is an optimal score. So we see that there is some subject specificity in terms of the optimal scores for these 7 different factors. They're not all the same for each subject. What I want to do now is to go on and look at some examples of some scoring clusters, some scoring patterns. So one example of a scoring pattern that we may see is when all of the students' scores for their different subjects are all clustered and fixed in one particular area. Now what that shows us is that that student is adopting that position, that mindset, in all of their subjects and is not adapting them at all. Therefore, one of the goals that we're going to seek to make through the program is to help the student to discriminate between adopting that mindset in some subjects when it's appropriate, but being able to be flexible, more flexible in choosing other mindsets when that is also appropriate. We may also see what we would call inaccurate adaptation, where students have their scores scattered, so some will be here, some will be here, some will be here, some will be here, and those scores will be scattered around inaccurately, and we need to help those students to more accurately choose the optimal mindset. Sometimes we'll find that student scores are clustered, but there may be a single outlier. Now when we see that, again, that is going to be indicative that in that particular lesson there may be something very distinct going on, and that is going to be an area that we want to focus on with our students in our conversations. And finally, we just want to flag up that the disclosure score, which is the first of the factors that we get reported on, is very significant. And the willingness of students to disclose the questions, the doubts, the needs, uncertainties that they have in their lessons is the most important indicator of whether the student is going to be able to access learning. And so we want to flag up that this is perhaps the most important factor for us to be considering, because if students are not disclosing, this of course is going to undermine the ability of them to give their teachers feedback, and for them to receive their teachers' feedback, for the teachers to know exactly what is going on for them. So it directly fits in with the first of those EEF targets of improving student feedback. Okay, I want to go through how we can prioritize which of the factors we are going to address with our individual student over the course of the 10-week intervention. When we receive our student's report, the first thing we're going to look through on all 7 of the report pages is to look at the student's baseline for that particular factor. The baseline is scored at the bottom there, and that tells us the student's instinctive mindset for this factor when they are outside a classroom context. So if you like, it represents the student's habitual mindset, which they may default to unless they make an additional effort. So we want to find out what the student's baseline mindset is for each of their factors, and then secondly, having done that, we want to see whether they shift from that baseline to a different mindset position in when they engage in their different subjects. So here, for example, we can see that there's almost no shift for this student in terms of disclosure when they're engaging with art, but when they engage with English and maths and science, their level of disclosure goes down from their baseline, which is here. It gets lower, so they are less willing to disclose when they're engaging in science, maths and English. And so there is a difference between their baseline and what they're doing situationally there. And that may well be therefore something that we want to focus on as a priority in our conversations with them. Then we need to think, is the mindset that the students are adopting in their specific subjects, is this optimal or suboptimal? So the fact that they are shifting from their baseline may be a good thing or may not be a good thing. If they are shifting to become more optimal, then that is something that we want to be able to recognize and to affirm in them, and to encourage them to continue to do that, to make sure they're aware of it. So for example here, the optimal for this particular factor, disclosure, is in this position here, and this art score here is the closest to that optimal, and one would want to encourage the student to continue to do that. That's good. Whereas these mindsets here for the other subjects suggest a movement away from the optimal posture here, and so we need to think whether the student is actually making their learning less optimal in terms of the adaptation that they're making in their lessons. So having looked through the student's report, we're going to be able to prioritize the factors that we want to address with the student. We've got 10 weeks to do this, and week by week we're going to take one of those factors, so one of those pieces of feedback, and we're going to start with the ones that look most important, where there's most significance in the mindsets that the student is currently adopting, and we want to work with that in order to give us enough time to be able to support the student in having improved conversations with their teacher around that particular factor, and to enable there to be progress so that the student can see how they've actually moved forward over the course of the 10 weeks. So in our next clip we're going to come on to actually how to have conversations with students and how to track their progress.